Some people break under pressure. Others find purpose in it. Today's guest has spent his life helping people rebuild when everything is on the line. And this conversation will change how you think about leadership. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to the No Limit Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton. Today, I am joined by Jeremy Stalnecker. He's a Marine Corps veteran, author, speaker, and co-founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping military service members and their families recover from the unseen wounds of combat, including PTSD. Through Mighty Oaks, Jeremy has helped thousands of warriors rediscover purpose, identity, and hope through intensive peer-based programs and ongoing support. He's also the author of multiple books on leadership, resilience, trauma, and faith, and regularly speaks to military units, first responders, and organizations on the topics of leadership, identity, and spiritual resilience. That is a lot. Jeremy, what is up, dude?
Hey, Sean. Good to see you, man. Thank you. And I just told you I need to copy that bio because, man, that makes me sound a lot better than I actually am, but I appreciate it.
You know what? I am proud of my bio writing because I've had a couple of people tell me that. If they come on, I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Maybe put in my MBA to use somewhere, I guess.
That's why I'm here, because of that bio that you wrote. Now it makes sense.
Oh, man. Well, hey, look, you've led in military, in the ministry, and now in the nonprofit world. And I'm just wondering, how have those different environments shaped your understanding of leadership?
Yeah, man, my understanding of leadership, I think, has been so transformed because I've worked through those different areas of leadership and really helped me to settle where I am now. So I served in the Marine Corps as a combat leader. In fact, as we record, I don't know when this will go out, but as we record today, it's 23 years since the invasion into Iraq. I was a part of that with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. A lot of that's on my mind and my heart today, obviously, but I understood leadership in that specific context. I came from a family of strong people. I played sports and had strong coaches. The Marine Corps made sense. I learned in that environment that if you do your job well, you know your tactics, techniques, and procedures, so you know how things are supposed to work, and you're loud and aggressive, you're the guy who's always confident, pointing the way, that makes you a leader. So that's the leader, right? It's type A, super aggressive, don't get run over because someone's coming up behind you, right? That's the leader. And then I transitioned out of that, literally left a combat environment in Iraq. 30 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps off active duty, working in a church environment. And I was completely lost because that style of leadership didn't work in the ministry. And I tried for a little while. I didn't make a whole lot of friends. In fact, I created quite a bit of chaos trying to be that super aggressive type A guy. And it sent me down this road to really discover what is leadership, not how is leadership done, but what is it fundamentally? And, I looked at ministry leaders, and I read books on ministry leadership and things that we call servant leadership, and came to the conclusion that a lot of what was being done in ministry was kind of the same as what we were doing in the Marine Corps, but it was a little more manipulative because you can attach God to it, right? And so it was still getting people to do what I want them to do to accomplish my goals and my mission. But now there's a spiritual component, so I can kind of compel people to do what I want them to do. I really had this feeling that neither one of those is leadership. That's kind of how you do it, maybe, but that's not what it is. And came to the conclusion on the other side of that a leader is someone who uses the resources, the opportunities, the abilities, the connections, whatever they have available to them for the benefit of those that they lead. It really is about serving. It's not about getting something out of people. It's about equipping them to be fully what they need to be. And so then you look at how leadership is done. That's very important in the right environment to know how to do leadership. But that doesn't make one a leader. And the last thing I'll say on that is if you mistake those two, knowing how to do leadership from being a leader, then when you transition out of one role and into another, you're always going to struggle because you associate what you did over there with being a leader, and that may not work where you are now.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that's such a great, arc of experience, right? From these two kind of extremes to sort of like causing you to settle on this idea that there's something in the middle here. Like there's some value in both these experiences, but coming back to identifying it for yourself. And What I'd love to hear is you go in a little more depth in you talk if you mistake doing the things that a leader does versus actually being a leader or creating that identity for yourself, that you'll struggle between roles. Can you kind of
Yeah.
elaborate on that for me?
Yeah. So my personal experience was leading in a combat environment as a Marine infantry officer. Again, when the war in Iraq started, 1-5, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines was the Marine infantry battalion that went into the country as part of the 1st Marine Division. The first KIA of the war, Lieutenant Shane Childress, was one of our Marines. This is the 23rd anniversary of his death as we think back on that. So leading there in this very complex environment, but understanding those roles because we had trained and I'd gone through the schools and I knew how to do that, even in the middle of chaos. And you understand what I'm talking about. Combat leaders understand this. Like in the middle of chaos, you can find incredible peace because you know what to do and it makes sense and it works. We made our way to Baghdad. The Battle of Baghdad on April 10th was also our battalion. 12-hour firefight to get to our objective, 100 casualties that day. It was this crazy environment that I understood how to lead in. And I took that same leadership style into a different environment and thought, because I led there, I can lead here. And so, I remember the first staff meeting I sat in as a church staff member. Someone said something I thought was stupid, so I told him I thought it was stupid. Then I got into an argument with him, and then I got thrown out of the meeting. And that happened a lot. Things I didn't like, I tried to correct on the spot, right? And I had no influence or authority to do that, but I was that guy. And eventually people not responding to that type of leadership in this different environment created great frustration because I didn't know what to do. If that doesn't work here, I don't know what to do. And then that frustration led to anger, and that led to outbursts and a lot of other problems in my work life and in my home life. But I think people who've transitioned out of those hyper-aggressive leadership environments into different environments understand exactly what that is, or they understand how to be a leader in that aggressive environment, and then they go home and have no idea how to lead their kids and how to lead their family and how to be a leader in this different environment, because screaming at them or setting this rigid set of rules for them to function under, it doesn't work the same way it does in a different environment. And yet we'll also see people who transition from one role to another, from one place to another, from, very high capacity business leaders to some other role later on in their lives. And they just seem to move fluidly through those. Well, what's the difference? They understand that how I did it over there was important over there, but that didn't make me more or less a leader. It meant I had a good, business acumen or a high leadership IQ. I could figure it out. Emotionally, I understood how to function there. That was important there, but I'm a leader if I serve there using those rules and then go home and I serve using a different set of rules. Leadership is the same. I'm serving. I'm just doing it in a different way. Or I find myself in a consulting role. A lot of people outside of business end up in a consulting role. What's my job? My job is to serve the people that I'm working with. Or I find myself in a different role somewhere else. And so for me, I really struggled. And when we talk about the problems of military transition, that to me is the issue. It's an identity that says I am a leader because I can do those things, instead of I am a leader because I've dedicated my life to using what I have for the benefit of those that I lead.
I love that definition or grounding, or I'm trying to find the right word, but like the space that you're creating there, you're defining around leadership. Like
Yeah.
I'm using my resources to serve others, and then how can I apply that in different areas? I'm curious. One of my beliefs, right, and it sounds like yours, is that part of getting to that place, the getting to what you're talking about, is recognizing that you have to lead yourself first.
Yeah.
And so obviously you went through your own leadership journey in this and you work with a lot of leaders. So like, what does that take?
Yeah. Well, I think it takes, first of all, clarity around why I'm here, right? So this goes back to my identity. It's an understanding of who I am, and coming from a faith context, I look at that in a very specific way, but it's grounding who I am. That's not tied to a job, a role, a uniform, a title, or anything else. It's tied to something that isn't immutable, something that's unchangeable, right? So it starts there. And then, the Marine Corps has a lot of phrases, right? But one is you need to master yourself, right? And that's it. It's leading yourself. But that needs to be done, again, with a goal. What is the goal? If I want to be in a position where I can serve other people, there's a definition of leadership that I use and that I've written about. Leadership is taking people from where they are to where they need to be. Leadership is moving people the people that I have the opportunity to influence from where they are right now to where they need to be. And so I'll pour everything I have into them so they can get to where they really need to be. And I, as a leader, will also benefit from that. But it begins with mastering myself, with being someone who leads myself well. And what does that mean? It means I'm learning everything that I can learn. I'm trying to understand the new environment or the different environments that I might currently find myself in. I am putting myself in a position physically and emotionally and spiritually where I can function well and at a high level wherever I find myself. But it's all with the goal of I want to be the very best version of myself in all of these areas. Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, financially. I want to be the best in all of these environments. Why? So that I'm in the very best position I can be to live out my created purpose of serving the people that I have the benefit of leading.
That's a great answer. And you brought up the faith background, and then also some of maybe the issues. You mentioned the word manipulation around the faith part, right? Like you can basically say, well, you can attach the God thing to it, and it gets you to do something. So this is like a very interesting fact for me, because I see different people and I see people approach this differently in the faith space. So I'm interested in your opinion on this, because what I see, I guess, two camps of this a bit, and maybe you can tell me if you see this too, or if you see it differently. I see people who will approach whatever faith background or holy book, whether that's the Bible or that's a Torah or the Quran, whatever that might be, and say, this is this book. Here's what God means, or this is what God says. And they come from they're the translator for that. And then they come from I also see other people say, look, I've read these things. Other people say these things. This is what I think it means. What do you think?
Yeah.
And for me personally, the latter version resonates with me much more than the person who claims to have the true definition of whatever is holy. But I see I'll be honest, I see more of the former, at least in my circle, than I see of the latter.
Yeah.
And I see personally a bit of a problem there when it comes to your point, potentially manipulating by claiming some sort of extra knowledge or being the gatekeeper to that. First of all, I guess before we get into how does that apply to leadership? Does that environment does this sound the same environment you've encountered, or no?
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty deep question and theologically broad, right? But so where do you land on this? Again, there's a lot of nuance. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think there's a lot of nuance in this. I would come from a position where I believe the Bible is authoritative in that it was given to us by God. And we should then view the world from the lens, we would call it a biblical worldview, from the lens of Scripture. It's not a truth, it is truth. That's where I would settle. Now, that doesn't mean that because I believe that, have some kind of access to extra biblical, that's outside of the Bible, knowledge from God. And when I talk about manipulation in the faith space, we see this a lot, right? I mean, get on social media or whatever, right? We see this a lot. It is people literally claiming to have an extra revelation or an extra biblical knowledge, something that's not available to you. We could go back in church history and we could go back several hundred years, and this was the church holding the Bible in a language that people couldn't understand. Why? Because they believed they had special knowledge, and only those who were part of the priesthood or part of the clergy or part of the whatever had access to that. I don't believe that at all. I believe that everyone has access to the Bible, or should have access to it, and that what's written is what is true. Now, we may differ on how we apply what the Bible says in our cultural context, in our family context, or whatever. That's something we could discuss. But it's not using the Bible as a hammer to get people to do what you want them to do. It's allowing the Bible to provide a worldview. Here's why this is important to me. Because I believe, based on the creation account in Scripture, that we were created in the image of God, that we were created with purpose and design. And so believing that, I now need to live out a life of purpose and design. My identity needs to be found in what I believe is my created purpose. And when people say, I have no purpose, I don't know who I am, I've lost hope, all those things that people struggle with, and certainly they do. Christian people do as well, Bible-believing people do as well. It's a belief about self that's not grounded in what I would call truth, what I believe is truth, that we were created in the image of God for a purpose. And so I can live however I want to without purpose, without design, without hope, without influence, without impacting the world around me. And I don't think that's how we were created. And so, again, that was a kind of a roundabout of your actual question, but there's a lot of nuance. I don't think it falls on one or the other. The Bible should never be used as a bludgeon to get people to do what you want them to do, nor is it something that is only held for a few select people that God has chosen who get to read the Bible and interpret it for others. In fact, the Bible says of itself, Scripture is of no private interpretation. That's right in there. And the people who hold it as private look over that verse. And so I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it, because then I appreciate you expanding on that, because then it gets to interpretation, right? Like if you
Sure.
and I both read the same set of scripture, how we interpret that. And so I guess it would be then how am I conveying this as my interpretation of the ultimate truth, or am I conveying that my interpretation is now the ultimate truth?
Yeah, right. Well,
Interesting, like nuance.
And I think that's where you have to ground yourself somewhere, right? And people would say, how do you have the truth? And I don't have whatever. Again, that's a big argument. But if we don't find a place to ground ourselves, to moor ourselves to tie ourselves to, and I won't say pick one, because I do believe it's important which one you pick, but at the very most basic level, I think all of us understand the thing that makes us uniquely who we are. We can't touch it. We can't smell it. We can't, put our finger on it. There's something more going on than what we can see and what we can experience with our senses. I think most of us could step back and look at the world around us and go, man, there's something else going on. Look at creation, look at these things and go, there's something else going on. So tying my identity and my purpose to that something else really touches who we actually are, instead of what we're being told we are, or what we're being, this mold we're being pushed into culturally or socially. And so it does become very, very important. The interpretation issue, very, very important. Again, we could do a whole podcast on how we arrive at the interpretation of texts. And that is a wonderful conversation. I think it's outside of the scope of what we're talking about here, but we do have to.
I'm qualified to talk about.
Well, we do. And I think this is for everyone. As a leader, you have to be tied to something transcendent, right? What does transcendent mean? It means it doesn't change. It doesn't change. Your relationships may change. Your financial status may change. Your level of importance among your peers or coworkers, colleagues may change. And so you need to find your identity in something that doesn't change, or when those things do change, you no longer know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you don't know why you're here. And that leads down a very dark, very difficult hole that I've been in, and that a lot of other people find themselves in.
I love how you're hitting on identity and purpose, and we'll get more into these, because I think when I talk also with transitioning military folks or people interacting with military folks, and military just being, a background I come from and you're come from, but what I've seen in my life, I'm sure you have too, as working with different groups, is that this is not just a military problem. That's right. I mean, I see it with, I saw when my mom retired, my mother retired, and she was an educator in special education for decades, and that was her whole identity, and that was gone. It's like, oh no. Or you see it from someone who maybe was like, stayed home, raised the kids, homeschooled, like did all those things, and then the kids leave, and they're like, my whole identity was tied to like these beings needing me. That's where my value came from, right? And to your point, that becomes a very fragile foundation. I'm interested in your take on this. I went through there's so many different ways to look at identities. I remember one exercise I did when I was struggling with my transition out of the military, and this identity thing was, I thought, well, I need to come up with I need to come up with a few words, like descriptive words for my identity, that if I, you talk about everything moves in strips. If I'm just like on an island by myself, like there's not, not even husband, father, CEO, whatever, you're on an island, like no one's around. You're still you. So who are you now? And it's funny, the words I came up with were warrior, rebel, and leader.
Yeah. They're so closely aligned, those three words.
Yeah. But it's like, so I don't know, but that was an exercise that I thought through. So when you think through this transcendent identity that's not reliant on an external situation or position or relationship to define itself. What kind of exercises or thought process do you help people go through?
Yeah, it's funny you talk through that, because I tried to settle on that and work through who am I? What do I want my kind of legacy to be? Whatever that looks like. And again, a little bit of a different perspective, but I came up with this sentence, not a word, but this sentence. I want organizations and individuals to be better off for me having been a part of their lives. I want organizations to be better if I have an interaction with them. I want individuals to be better because I was there. And I want them to be able to look back and say, we're better off than we would have been without him. And I can do that anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's not tied to a job. It's not tied to even a relationship. It's not. As I move through life, what's my goal? I want the people that I come into contact with, the organizations that I have the opportunity to serve with or to consult with, to be better off because I was a part of their organizational or personal lives. And then, you mentioned your mom. I talk about my mom all the time. She worked for the same company for 35 years. And when she retired, we were just talking about this the other day, actually, and because we're talking about transitioning military, and she's like, we've had this conversation a lot, but when she transitioned, she was, I won't say lost, but it's like, who am I now? If I'm not that person getting the phone calls and dealing with the fires I've got to put out and all the things, then who am I? And so, yeah, this certainly is not a military thing. I've been in a role for a long time and now I'm not thing. So one of the exercises I try to walk people through when we're talking about this, and again, I would talk about identity from, an explicitly maybe faith perspective, but you still have to break it down like, okay, well, what does that mean? Because we're not all the same. Even if you believe in creation and the rest of it, you're not created exactly like everyone else, nor should you try to be like everyone else. So you're still an individual. So it begins with understanding I'm who I am because of the intangible. I'm not who I am because of, what the world tells me I am or a job that I do necessarily, but it's intangible. There's something in me that makes me unique. So I need to start asking questions. Questions like, what would I do if I had the opportunity to do it, even if it didn't create income? What's something that I would be willing to invest my life in if paying the bills and feeding myself, if that wasn't something that I was worried about? What would I want to do? That should be unique to you. And I'm not talking about recreation or whatever, right? Again, it goes back to I'm here to serve. What would I want to do? What's a gift or a talent? Maybe it's not fully even developed in my life, but a gift or a talent that I have that's unique to me. Something that I enjoy doing, something that I've been able to do throughout the course of my life that's unique to me, that speaks to who I am. What do people who know me well and are honest with me say about me? If I went to 5 people who know me pretty well, maybe not family members, they don't have an emotional stake in this, but they know me pretty well, and said, how would you define me? What would you say is a gift that I have? Or what would you say is something unique about me compared to the rest of the people that you know? What would they say? And so it really is digging down and trying to find the uniqueness of who you are and the thing that causes you some level of excitement in your life. This is the thing I'd rather be doing than what I'm doing right now. And if it also connects to what I would say is a God-given purpose of serving others, then man, I think you've stumbled upon your identity. I can do this thing that I have a talent for, that I would do without taking money for, that serves other people. That's who you are. And I think you need to lean into that.
I think that's super powerful, and it resonates with me in my own life, and then with clients I work with on sometimes if I see someone kind of struggle with this or like what do I do next or with professionally, personally. And I think that in those big moments, but also in sort of micro moments in life, that tuning into yourself of like, is this giving me energy or is this taking away energy? Right? Is this bringing my like vibe, spiritual stuff? Is this bringing me up or is this a burden? And I think so often in modern society and America and everywhere else, we're so used to using, at least for me, like I'm so used to using in the past, like my intellect to logic around something when something doesn't feel right. And I'm just like, but if I do this and that, then it's like, and I can kind of convince myself and ignore these internal, this natural, intangible intuition that we have, our body telling us. And if we fine tune into that, like I just think of in the big moments, going through this exercise starts to fine tune this thing. But when you get it down, like what a powerful tool in the moment when you're making micro decisions throughout your day.
Yeah, and I think some people would look at this as, well, then you're saying that business leadership, executive leadership, that thing is opposed to what you're talking about, right? Because it sounds real soft skilly. Like you talk about the micro moments, right? It conjures up this image of like sitting somewhere barefoot and cross-legged and like, right? Well, no, I think what it does is it puts the right perspective on executive leadership and business leadership and making money and doing those things. You do those now, not to give you purpose, but so that you can be equipped to fulfill your purpose. I need to be a great business leader. I need to make money. I need to do well in whatever venture I'm in. I need to learn. This goes back to leading yourself, right? I need to do that. Why? Because it puts me in a position where I can fulfill the purpose for which I was created. I can live out my identity and my purpose. And I think it puts the right perspective then on all of that. How am I spending my time on the weekend when I'm not in the office? How am I, spending time with my kids? What am I thinking about? What am I reading? What am I engaged in? Yeah, it touches everything when you've settled on this is who I am, this is why I'm here, this is what I'm excited about. Well, then everything else in your life now becomes about equipping you and others to fulfill that purpose.
There's a story, it's an old story that stuck with me from Jordan Peterson that's coming from me. And he talks about when he was a clinical psychologist, he was working with his drug addict, right? He's addicted to cocaine. And he's like, I would know when he got his, basically like his welfare check or like a social security check,
Right.
because I wouldn't see him for like a week. He's like, just take it and immediately use it for his habit, right? And then he said, one day there was like a backlog where he didn't get paid for a few months, and then he got like 3 months at once, and they found him like 2 days later dead in a gutter. And so his point was that like people don't have a money problem, they have a purpose problem.
Yeah,
he had no
that's right.
purpose.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's like such a extreme example, but man, it sticks with you.
I talk about this a lot when we're talking about topics like veteran suicide and some of these other issues, because so much of the attention of like the VA and others is on intervention. So what are the signs of someone who's about to harm themselves? What are the things we can do to prevent someone from harming themselves? Do we need to take their firearms away? Do we need to lock up their medications? Do we need to put them in an observed environment? What do we need to do to intervene, to prevent someone who's already made the decision to hurt themselves? What do we need to do to keep that from happening? And that's important. I'm not against that, right? It's important. But we're looking at it wrong, I think, because if a person is clear on who they are, they've addressed the identity issue. And even if they struggle with that sometimes, they need to be brought back and they need a good group of people around them and coaching to get back to that. They've at least dealt with it and they get it. This is who I am. Sometimes I drift. I've got the right people to push me back there, but this is who I am. If you know who you are, then you should know why you're here. This is who I am. Then this is my purpose. My identity leads to my purpose. Well, if I know who I am and I know why I'm here, then I have hope because I'm living out the reason I was put on this planet. And so instead of looking at how can we prevent someone who's lost hope from hurting themselves, we go back 3 steps and say, let's help them understand who they are, understand why they're here, and understand why it is that they should have hope based on who they are and why they're here. And so I absolutely agree with you. I think it's that. When you have a purpose, so many other things come into focus and you're able to walk that out and live that out. And you're not thrown back and forth by what's happening at this exact moment in your life. You're focused on something way down the road.
Which sounds to me like the exact definition of resilience.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's what it is to be resilient. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. The life throws you, life changes because, it's not all going to be butterflies and rainbows for everybody all every day, So,
that's right.
I like that. And it's such a call out, right, of, to your point, important work, but sort of this very like Western medicine science backed approach of like, we did this intervention and like, you have to show this one variable thing. It changes this thing instead of, almost from like so here's the pill to stop this symptom from popping up. Here's this to pop your blood pressure or your whatever. It's like, instead of going all the way back to like, what is this root cause, right? It's this root cause that causes the cascade. And sometimes
it's crazy, man.
Lose track of it.
It's crazy. The work that we do with veterans, we'll have people come to our programs who are currently on 20 plus medications every single day. And it's like, how did you go from being a combat leader to being on 20 medications a day. So they start breaking it down, and they have medication to help them wake up, medication to help them sleep, medication that's anti-anxiety. And then because that causes suicidal ideation, they've got a medication for that. And it's all of these medications managing emotions. And exactly to your point, instead of saying, what's the actual problem? Let's address that. It's let's just numb you out enough or manage your symptoms enough that you won't make the ultimate decision to hurt yourself. And that is, it's how we've chosen to deal with so many of these issues. And what a terrible way to live. um,
Man, this is I agree, and I think the world and a lot of the great work you're doing and other veterans are coming to. There's enough of us post 9/11 veterans, I think, out there doing great work around this and kind of
Agreed.
spreading the word about other options that are so powerful. And hopefully, to your point, that this isn't just a military
right. That's right.
veteran thing,
That's right.
and so hopefully we can spread this in a wider
good.
breadth.
That's good.
So as you talk about leaders, like moving people from where they are, from
Yep.
where they are now to where they need to be. So now it's like, all right, we've got this identity and purpose as ourselves, but how do we now move into an organization and help others start to even identify where they are and where they need to go?
Yeah. And again, that's a big question. If you're clear on why you're here, though, so you become, let's say, you're the manager of a department. Most managers look at their employees as assets to be managed. It's kind of in the name, right? So we're given a goal we need to reach, we need to accomplish something. There's a task that hire has handed down to us. And so now I need to manage these assets to get that done, to make that happen. And what this does with that definition is it begins to look at people, first of all, not as assets, but as people who have jobs and families, and they're trying to accomplish things, and they're here because they need to make money, not because they necessarily love what they're doing, right? Maybe they do, but that's not always the case. So I'm not going to look at them as assets to be used to accomplish my goal. Instead, I'm going to ask the question, what are they good at? Are they in the very best position they should be in this company? Do I have an opportunity or an ability to help them get more education, or to cross-train somewhere else, or to put them up for a promotion? Because this isn't about me. And so as I interact with the people that work for me, it's not about keeping them close or keeping them restricted so they'll only do what I want them to do. I'll never send them off somewhere else. I'll never let them learn anything else. It's always about understanding the individuals that you have working for you, having enough of a relationship with them to know what they are good at, maybe what their hopes and dreams are, what they'd like to accomplish with their lives, and then looking at yourself, inventorying what you have available to you to help them accomplish that. The strange thing about that is it sounds like you're going to lose as a manager doing it that way, but you always win when you're helping the people that you lead become really who they were called and created to be, moving from where they are right now. And maybe they're great where they are right now, but you can see in them, they should be over here. Maybe they don't even see it in themselves, but you begin to help them get there. Your department grows if you're a department manager. Your company grows if you're leading a company. Your family grows and flourishes if you're leading children. This principle allows people to be fully who they're supposed to be, which makes everyone around them better.
I love the call out here on the consistency, right? Like when you approach life this way, then you may not saying you're going to treat your 5-year-old the same you treat your VP of sales.
Yeah.
But your general approach to life and how you show up for people and why you're there, pouring into people, and seeing those people first and helping them find themselves and where they're going to go. Like, the nice part about that is now in my mind, that's a skill and a way of being. Even doesn't have to, as so many people feel like, take one mask off and put another mask on.
That's right.
And have to master 2 or 3 or 4 ways of being. When you find your center on that, you get to just get really good at that one way of being, regardless of the situation, because you're practicing one way of being.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the challenge with people who do really well, particularly in, high octane environments like the military or as police officers or whatever. That works great over there, but it doesn't work great over here. So yeah, I mean, I think of my kids this way, and this is to me an easy thing to picture that represents this. I have 4 children, and I believe that my goal as a parent is to equip them to be productive citizens and adults, so they can go off without me and make good decisions and contribute to the world. But they're all different. I have a 26-year-old daughter who's an accountant. She's doing great. I have a 24-year-old son who's a police officer. He's doing great. I've got a 17-year-old daughter who wants to be a hairdresser, right? She's doing great. And then I have a 16-year-old son who loves football and loves sports, but wants to be a paramedic. So if I, as a parent, try to imprint on them as they're coming up, so they're much younger now, and I try to imprint on them, I'm trying to get them to do what I want them to do. I'm trying to get them to go to schools and pursue careers that will make me look good. Whatever the case, it's all about me, and I lead them that way. Maybe I manipulate them that way. Then they may do what I want them to do, but I think I've failed as a parent. Parenting in this context that we're talking about is looking at each one of your kids as individuals, understanding that, in the beginning, you're just trying to get them to walk and brush their teeth and do their other things. But at some point, you start to recognize, well, they have a skill for this, or they have, an adeptness at this, or an interest in that. And as a parent, instead of saying, I want them to accomplish X, I look at them and say, well, this is where they are. Boy, I see this in them. I see this opportunity, this talent, this ability, this thing. So let me get them in the right environments and around the right people so they can develop that, so they can fully be what they're supposed to be. So I'm going to move them as a kid from where they are to an adult where they need to be, and they can go off and live the life that they were created to live. I see that clearly in that context, but you're right. You take that to a business context, it's not that much different. Obviously, the goals are different and the roles are different, but it's looking at people as individuals and saying, man, you're an awesome, whatever, IT professional because you're smart and you like that, but you'd be really good in this other role. So let me help you get to where you really need to be and where your personality would fit best. And I think you'd make the biggest impact. And it's just working with people that way, helping them to go from where they are to where they need to be. But that requires A, understanding leadership's not about you. B, being willing to step back and learn. You have to understand where people are coming from and listen to them and see in them what maybe they don't even see themselves. And then number 3, utilizing your resources to help them grow and get there.
And Journey, you're doing such great work through your books and through the Mighty Oaks Foundation. What, if you look back 20, 30 years from now, like, what is the legacy you want to leave?
Yeah, I think it's what I mentioned a little while ago. I want people to say we're better off because he was a part of our lives. And if I can do that, to a greater or lesser degree, and I hope that some will feel more that way than others perhaps, but I want that to be the legacy. I don't want it to be a platform. I don't want it to be, amassed wealth or influence or whatever. I'm not against those things, and go ahead and amass those if you can. But when you're dead, no one's going to care about that. I want people to say, we're better off as an organization. The organization that I lead now, we're better off because he was a part of what we did. I want veterans, because of what I do, to say we're better off in our homes and our personal lives because he was involved. I want my kids to say we're the adults that we are because our dad invested in us and helped us get to where we needed to be. I want my wife to say I'm a better person because he was a part of my life. And so, when I look at what I'm involved in, the role, the title, it doesn't matter to me as much as, can I be in a place personally where I can influence others for good? And if that happens, then I'll be happy.
Beautiful. Man, thank you so much for your time,
Yeah.
Jeremy, and the work you're doing. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Really appreciate it. That's great.
Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.